On this episode of Intent Topics, we have special guest Dave Babst from Othot. Today we'll be talking about building a successful sales, marketing, and customer success engine. All right, hey Dave, we're excited to have you on the show today. Why don't you tell us what you're doing now and how you got there?
Absolutely. And, first, thanks so much for having me. Really great to be with you both. So I'm with a company called Othot. It's O-T-H-O-T. Othot's sort of a mashup of original thought, which ironically enough is trademarked. But Othot is a predictive and prescriptive analytics platform that's been designed in its early form for higher education institutions. We're helping colleges and universities to enroll the right students and to help them graduate. And we're helping them do that through the more progressive and advanced forms of analytics that are available today. And we're bringing that to them in the form of a technology-based platform.
Wow, cool. Can you talk to kind of like what some of these analytics are? I'm kind of curious how you help people graduate. That's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're basically bringing a variety of forms of data together through multiple data sources, most of which are proprietary to the institution. And then we're bringing that all together through machine learning algorithms to fundamentally better understand who a prospective student is, what makes them tick, and what it is that an institution can do to better engage them, whether they be a prospective student or a current student, to a specific outcome. And, I think the biggest two advancements that are working in concert with one another are the real advancement in advanced analytics that has occurred since I got involved with it is through prescriptive analytics, which essentially enables you to change outcomes. And so we're bringing that type of discipline to the analytics that we employ, and then we're also combining that with technology and essentially equipping schools with what-if simulation functionality in the form of a platform to really understand what it is they can do to help a student with a particular outcome. And so we're getting down to the individual student. We're helping see where, in the case of something like an enrollment decision, we're helping them understand where their marketing efforts could be most effective, where they can make best utilization of their recruiters, how their financial aid dollars can be put to best use. And then when it comes to graduation, we're doing the same thing, but really focus more on those initiatives that exist within the school and the resources that exist at that institution that can help the student to achieve that outcome.
Wow.
So what role inside the institutions are you typically dealing with? Is it admissions or guidance counselors or what's the
good question. So it really depends on the engagement, but when it comes to an enrollment type engagement, we're typically dealing with an enrollment management office. That office is typically led by a VP of enrollment management or a chief enrollment officer. And then when we help with graduation related engagements, we're typically working with a vice president of student success. Sometimes at an institution, the person that's responsible for enrollment is also responsible for retention and graduation. And then in other cases, we might be working with like a provost or a vice president of academics.
Gotcha.
So not naturally the techiest of types.
No, although I would say that certainly on the enrollment side in particular, they're becoming more adept. But I would say, as a general rule of thumb, higher education tends to be a late adopter when it comes to technology and to more innovative solutions. So, some of what we're bringing to higher education has been available in the private sector for years. right? You see companies like Google, Amazon, make use of AI and AI informed decision making on a regular basis.
Sure, yeah, and I think that sets the table nicely for, I know what Chris is chomping at the bit to talk about,
Yeah,
around customer success, and we're talking about prescriptive AI in an industry that has just a gigantic amount of brain, right? But not
right.
necessarily the the frequent use of technology like we might have in our sales jobs or customer success roles. So
Right.
yeah, this is exciting.
Yeah, talk to me about like what things you're seeing in regards to retention and retaining customers and on the tool, and how you're keeping people, renewing, et cetera.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things are important when it comes to ensuring that customers are happy. I think first and foremost, so much of it is rooted in how a prospect is sold, and ensuring that expectations are set appropriately, that they really understand what it is that they're buying, and that fundamentally there's a really seamless handoff on our side when it comes to understanding goals and what's important to the customer. I think everything sort of starts with that level of understanding. Then I think along with that, it's really critical for us to understand, who within that institution is going to be really important when it comes to adoption, and what their model is for working with across their people, right? And so, in a lot of ways, I think when you understand the goals, you understand how they work, and you understand who and how you need to deploy the solution. It's really helpful in setting the table for success. And then, I think along with that, there comes a level of understanding when it comes to just being the resource to the customer and what that means to them. For some, and especially in the early days, I think you're figuring some of it out as you go along, but I think it's really important to figure out what the customer expects when it comes to having a healthy relationship with their partner, and how they define that. Because in this space in particular, probably more so than any I've worked in, the customer, a happy customer, is so invaluable, because they tell their friends, right? And they, in a lot of ways, if they are very happy, they can become your sales force, or an extension of your sales force.
Yeah. Are you finding that your sales team is good at identifying good fit customers, or is that a challenge for you?
I think in the early days, we were trying to figure out who that right customer was, and so we took on customers that were interested in working with us, and that allowed us to learn. I think this year we've developed a better sense for within our market what the profile is for a customer that will likely be a really good customer for us. And I think over the course of the past 6 months, we've looked to really translate that in a way that's understandable for the sales team.
Cool.
And that's been a big, probably a big part of what I've been focused on over the course of the past 6 months, is helping with that translation, really creating sales enablement tools, and, reassessing our brand positioning within the market, and really translating that voice of customer into what our message is as we put it out into the marketplace.
Very cool. Love it.
So Dave, there was a point you made, which I think is an interesting point to talk about for anybody in kind of a startup role or launching a new service line. And that was, there's that sort of iterative process where you're taking clients on, you're learning from them. You're not necessarily, we're starting relationships, but maybe not, where they're not lasting as long as you want. What are some of the things that you kind of pulled out of those that you guys have incorporated in your game today? And what are some of the things that you think are okay? Like if you were to do this again, you'd be like, you know what, that's going to blow up in my face, but I'm glad that it did,
right?
Because it taught us X, Y, and Z. I'd love to hear about that because I do think that that's one of the biggest, most stressful points of creating something new is figuring out the fit, right?
Right.
So I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah. So I think that there is an iteration to it. I think you do have to have a strong hypothesis for what it is that you're going to do to create value. In having that hypothesis, it needs to align with the message that you bring into the marketplace and with where your product is in terms of its readiness for commercialization. We were really fortunate in the sense that we have a very seasoned CTO, and there was a lot of work that had been put into developing a platform that predated me. So, I think when it comes to that element, I was fortuitous in this particular venture. But I think those things are really important. And then I think there needs to be, an openness to explore what's working and what doesn't. One of the things that was extremely attractive for me in taking on the role at this company, albeit at a really early stage, at least for where I've taken roles in my past, is that it gave me the opportunity to build from the ground up, the functional units of sales, marketing, and customer success. And so I had the ability to, in a lot of ways, ensure that what we were doing was very connected in terms of what we learned from the customer, how that could make its way into our marketing message, and how that translated into what we talked about when we were selling the product. So,
and even probably into the product too itself, right?
And then from there, I think also into how we can inform the product roadmap and where the platform.
Yeah.
Right. So that like those pieces in the early days, I think, are incredibly important, and I think it's really critical to ensure that even if you don't have a role that allows you to create those more direct linkages, that you're working in such a way that you're able to bring those things together. Not that you're ever going to solve it in its perfect form, but you're going to continually make it better.
Right. And do you have a product team that you're in communications with that's receptive to this?
Definitely. And I think one of the learnings for me in taking the role with Othot is I'm working now more with engineers and developers than I ever have, and that's a very a different skill set, different mindset, and a different personality type, right? And there's some adjustments that anybody needs to make in order to effectively communicate with folks that think, act, and process information differently.
Yeah. You get to the point where you have to almost put yourself in the mindset of the engineering team to explain either a feature or a bug, right? And be like, you have to speak very specifically so that they understand what you're saying. Right. But once you get that down, you can find yourself being effective. At least I've been able to once we speak each other's language.
Right. And I think the thing that's probably worked as well for us with that as anything is it's kind of like, if you don't want to hear from me, hop on the phone with the customer. They'll tell you, right? And
what would you prefer?
Right. And I think oftentimes that can diffuse whatever misconceptions there may be, or even whatever egos there might be involved in who's right or who's wrong. Right. At the end, it doesn't really matter if I'm right or you're wrong. It's who's on the other line.
Customer saying this. Yeah. And here's X number of support tickets that they're asking for this, and there's the volume of that. Yeah. That data always drives those conversations best. Numbers don't lie. So being that you're kind of growth, sales, customer success, I've been dying to ask, and I kind of proposed this to our own team months back because we've been thinking about scaling, and I introduced this idea that I've heard of a couple companies doing, and it's this idea of the salesperson lives with this customer through selling,
right,
onboarding,
right,
and retaining. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, or if you've tried that, or if you have any opinions on how that could be successful.
Yeah, so I think in the early days that is a really interesting way to think about it, and in some ways it was one of the benefits I had in the sense that I had responsibilities that cut across sales and customer success.
Right.
And I think it is I think a way to train new folks to really understand what a customer goes through on the sales side. I think that does become more challenging as you start to think about scalability and really building out teams that are focused on growing and serving at different rates and levels than what the company may have been doing in prior years. I think as you continue to grow and scale and invest institutional dollars, part of what you need to contemplate is how to increase the level of specialization in every area that you have without losing maybe some of the magic of being able to move in an agile way and to bring the voice of the customer into every interaction that you have, just simply because you're involved in it all, right?
Right. Well, that's what I love about it is so I understand that you maybe potentially sacrifice, a skill set to have a well-rounded kind of role. For example, some people are just in their comfort zone selling, right? But when it comes time to onboard a customer and the technical setup and stuff like that, it's just like fish out of water, right? So I understand that, but you have to imagine that to be with the customer through that whole journey must be kind of the most value you could possibly bring to that customer, so long as software does what the company needs it to do. But I feel like it'd be super valuable, and I like the trend. I'm just curious to hear how if others are kind of adopting it. Would you?
I think it's a wonderful concept, and I think that like I said, in the early days, it wasn't anything that was overwhelmingly challenging. I think as you grow and scale, there's probably a hybrid that you can utilize to sort of create that experience and really the empathy that's required to serve the customer through that journey, while at the same time not losing really the focus and the expertise that you're looking to build in a larger team.
Yeah, there's nothing like being on with a customer in their first few weeks and they'll tell you something that whether it was said or whether it's what they perceived, but you'll be like, the sales rep told you what? Like, you're like, that's not even like close to the realm of possible, but let's come up with a solution here because here we are. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a training thing, right? And the sales culture thing. So
it's a functional need thing too, right?
Well, salespeople, you sit in front of one. We don't just say what we need to say to close the deal. I think like on an average, but I think the question that I have for you, Dave, is, when you start to get that specialization, right? I think it's like easy to, like right now with Union, personally, I'm kind of in between three different worlds, sales, operations, and the actual delivery. Now, if I was to clone myself, for each of those three sort of areas, that obviously becomes difficult. What are some of the things that you've done or that you're working on that are kind of, working to sort of stitch that specialization together without losing that alignment?
Right. So great question, and one that I think is not easily answerable, because it is such a difficult question to address. But what I would say is that there are ways to do that while you are trying to scale, and some of the things that I'm involved with today that I hope are going to be helping to sort of achieve that involve a lot of the customer impact illustrations that we're trying to bring to life in terms of how we actually talk about the engagements that we're in and what the customer benefits from, and we're trying to use like we have this theme going on our blog right now called the Game Changer series, where we're trying to focus on individual customers within the partner schools that we work with and what it was that they did in working with us to do something cool and to see a result, right? And so there's bringing those stories to life in such a way that other people can tell them as if they were there. And I think that's when done really well on the marketing side, that can help to create that type of an experience in the way that the solution is positioned and in the way that the stories are told to illustrate the value. I think some other examples that I would offer up include like how we can better utilize video to show how the platform works in a way that's not just educational, but also creates a kind of a level of excitement in what somebody can do and how they can do it. This notion of empowerment that we try to instill in what we're offering to a prospective customer, right? So those are sort of examples on the marketing side. And then, one of the things that we're doing right now with our positioning with our message is really sort of reevaluating what it is that we say about our solution, which is fairly complex in nature. Like, how do we use simple language to talk about what we do in a way that really gets at the essence of what it is? And so, I think those are examples that are probably more marketing related, but that sort of get at this notion of bringing the voice of the customer and what it's like to be one of our customers into interactions that we have on the sales side.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. Like in sales, I always say the prospect will make a buying decision when value exceeds cost. Right. So it's interesting. I'm picking up on this where it's like you have to continue to build value throughout the process. Otherwise, the cost becomes, it's like, what am I paying for this, as opposed to what value am I deriving from this? That's interesting. So it's not selling or anything like that, but it is the same sort of basic concept that the value has to stay in front of the prospect, which is fantastic.
And then I'd say one of the other things that we're trying to do, certainly as our team grows, we with every customer that we have, we do a postmortem at the end of whatever cycle it is that we're working on in the engagement, and so we try to at least invite folks across different functional teams to participate in those interactions, because I think you get really, it's sort of a microcosm of the engagement in the sense that, you're doing a recap of what happened, where we were helpful. Oftentimes you're getting feedback, whether it be you guys were great or, we had these challenges. And then, you're also getting reactions to product roadmap items and ideas on, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could do this? So, I mean, that's another sort of example more rooted on the customer success side of how you can kind of create at least that experience while you're trying to scale and do it in a way that oftentimes requires more specialization from your teams.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, what evolutions or trends in your industry do you see having the largest impact or potential impact on you, and how are you guys adapting?
So there are a couple things that I think are happening from a trend perspective. I think fundamentally there are some demographic patterns at play across our country that are going to fundamentally change the size and the mix of prospective college and university students within the next 10 years. And that is going to have dramatic implications, and already is, with colleges and universities across the country. I think that, coupled with the potential for different forms of educating, i.e., online or through more experiential learning that are available today at a much lower cost, are going to really challenge the way that major institutions do business. And along with that, it's going to require that those institutions need to, as with any institution or with any organization, I should say, they need to really know their customer, which is the student, better than anybody else. I think at a macro level, there's this kind of element of retail, like a retail like business model that is sort of making its way into other industries. And this isn't a new trend, but it is certainly one that I think is becoming more of a reality in higher education, more so than it ever has.
Yes. Meaning like more transactional?
No, I'm meaning more like there's an expectation from the customer that you're going to know me and that you're going to anticipate my needs, and that I'm willing to maybe trade information about me that is private in order for you to know me better and to anticipate what I want. And so I think there's that level of expectation when that exists in younger people today more so than it ever has. And so along with that, it's requiring the market that we serve to adapt. And like what's accelerating that as much as anything is that there are going to be less students that look like the students that are at their institution today in the years to come. And in some areas of the country, they're going to be clear winners and losers, and they're going to be schools that go out of business. And we're seeing that, I think in like New England area in particular the past couple of years.
Yeah, wow. There's a lot of schools. One in Boston that like I remember visiting, like a nice school. It wasn't like a one of these degree mill schools. Wild. Do you see like a higher level of engagement with the students? This is purely has nothing to do with really the the tactics of customer success. But do you see like a higher engagement of the students as they are sort of requiring institutions to know more about them? Or is this kind of part of this like, millennial thread or trend? I'm a millennial, so I can say it. Where like the, it's like me, but then there's nothing really in return for the institution, right? So how is that playing out?
The simple answer to your question is yes. The more complicated answer is I think it's a little bit of both, in the sense that I think there is that sort of millennial mindset that you've described pretty well, that does exist. But I also think that it's one of those things where like I'll engage with you and I'll engage more deeply with you if you really know me, and you actually look to engage with me on my terms. if you're going to send me a view book that looks like it was made for my parents, and it's not something that it's not a way that I consume information, I'm gonna tune you out, right?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of both. It's kind of like you're dealing with the mindset and really that mentality to begin with, and then if you're gonna hit them up in a way that they don't appreciate, they're gonna tune you out. But on the flip side, if you do a good job with it, they're going to share. And they're going to share a lot more than you and I probably ever would have when we were that age.
Yeah. So it really is actually relevant. It's like if you spend a lot of money, you spend a lot of time and a lot of resources trying to understand your prospect, and you get it wrong, and you message to it wrong, then you'll lose. But if you get it right, like as you're saying, it really gains traction. So that's interesting. That's really, really interesting that I didn't realize that was happening. My little sister's in college right now, so I'm gonna talk to her about kind of how she's interacting with her university. Yeah. That's fascinating.
And
stuff.
Probably topic for another day, and not necessarily related to the topic at play with this podcast, but I do think there's a dimension to that exists in the workplace today when it comes to millennials and Gen Ys, probably more so Gen Ys now, really interacting with, Gen Xers in the workforce. And, there's a way, I don't profess to have it all figured out, but I will say I've been working with that generation, for the past 10 years of my career pretty extensively. And, how you manage, coach, interact with, and get the most out of folks from that generation is really different. The flip side is if you do it well, it's amazing, like the productivity and the creativity that can come out of folks that I've worked with, from that generation is really amazing, So topic for another day, I imagine, but it does translate.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I could spend some time on that one.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, Logan, let's wrap it up. This wraps up this episode of Intent Topics. I'm Chris Battis.
And I am Logan Kelly. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thanks, Dave, for stopping by. Please give us a 5-star rating on whatever podcast app you listen on, and we will see you next time.